Hello students, this is Aman Sharma and today we are going to discuss about one of the important chapter of class 8, that is weavers, iron smelters and factory owners. In the previous some of the chapters we already seen that how Britishers came up with new policies to colonize India. We also discussed about what type of revenue system they came up with in the countryside, mostly in rural areas. Then after we discussed about the revolt of 1857, many causes we discussed in revolt of 1857. Now here is a chapter in which we are going to discuss about the policies of Britishers and how it affected the textile in India, the weavers in India, then the iron smelters, local iron smelters. Then after we will also discuss about that how the industries, especially the cotton mills came into India, how the Tisco or another or other you can say these iron smelting plants set up in India. So let's start the chapter. So here, the first is the introduction of chapter. Before going deeper into the Indian textile weavers and other things, let's first discuss that how these textiles of India was famous in all over the world. The story of craft and industries of India during British rule by focusing on two industries, the textile industry and iron and steel industry. Somewhat later, if we talk, then Britain came to be known as workshop of the world. The reason behind this was Britain started exporting raw materials to other countries as well as the machines of the industries to other countries. That's why it started to be called as workshop of the world. Then we will see that how the pattern changed. The company was buying goods in India and exporting to the England and Europe. As we all know that a British East India Company came into India just for trade purpose. But slightly they changed themselves from this trading company to the political administration. With the growth of industrial production, British industrialists began to see India as a vast market, and over the time manufactured goods and Britain became flooding India. Now slowly the things were changing. The industries that developed into Britain, as we all know that industrialization first came in Britain, as the industries of Britain became very famous, they started producing goods on mass scale. They started exporting their goods to India, and hence India was the colony of Britishers. So the whole Indian market flooded with British made goods. Now here is the biggest question, that how did this affect Indian craft and industry? So in this chapter we will take out the answer of this question, that how did this affect Indian crafts and industries. Indian textile and the world market. It is very interesting to know that till the Britishers conquered Bengal after Battle of Plassey, that at that time the Indian textile were very much famous, especially the cotton textile was very famous in all over the world. Why it was famous? Because of its fine quality and exquisite craftsmanship. The designs that were made on the cloth were very fine, very beautiful, whether it's floral design or any other type of design. These cotton textile were traded in Southeast Asia, Java, Sumatra, Penang, and West and Central Asia. This is how, and also with this, the European companies also buy product from India, cotton textile from India, and they export or they sell it in the European market and get heavy profit. Now the memories are very important. So the memories of this flourishing trade, the craftsmanship of Indian weavers were also mentioned in many of the texts, including in English and other languages. As we all know, words always carries history. So here we will see some important words regarding the textile of India. The very first is the muslin. Muslin is the fine quality cloth, fine cotton quality cloth, and European traders generally first encountered this fine cotton cloth from India carried by Arab merchants. Arab merchants buy product from India and sell those product in the Arabian market. Now the European traders buy these textiles products from that Arabian market and then sell it to the European market. Now similarly, the Europeans usually buy this fine cotton quality of cloth from Mosul, which is now in Iraq. So this is how the Britishers started calling this fine cotton cloth as muslin. The second is the calico. This was also a kind of cotton cloth that when the Portuguese first came to India, they reached at the port of Calicut, which is in Kerala. With these spices, they took some cotton textile from here India to Europe. Now these cotton clothes were now came to be known as calico, as these cotton clothes were brought from Calicut. Now the next is a type of cloth which has floral design, special flowery designs, that is chintz. This chintz got its name, it derived from the Hindi word that is chint, and the cloth which have small and colorful flowery designs, they were known as chintz. The next is bandana. Bandana is also derived from the Hindi word bandhna, and these bandhana were generally the scarves or the neck band which were actually produced by the method of tying and dyeing. Indian textile in European market. As we already discussed that Indian textile were having very fine quality and they were famous all over the world. So the protest against this Indian textile goods were started. The reason behind it was the weavers of Europe were not able to sell their produce or sell their textiles. The reason was simple, because they have to compete with the fine quality of cloth which were exported or imported from India. Now, by seeing all these things, the government of Britain actually came up with a kind of act which was known as 720 Calico Act. This Calico Act came in 720 and banned it it put a ban on the printed cotton textile that was known as chintz. As we all know, chintz were actually the designs that were made on the cloth. So along with the cloth and the design, the cloth were totally known as chintz cloth. Now by this ban, what happened? The first to grow under. So some development happened in the Britain, and one very important industry which grown under the supervision, or we can say the protection of government of Britain, was the calico printing industry. Now what happens that Indian designs were now printed in England, means the previously the whole chain clothes were exported from India to Britain, but now with this ban, the ban was on only the design clothes which were known as chintz, but still the plain unbleached cloth and the fine white muslin were still exported from India. Now little bit scenario changed when development or we can say the industries came up in the line of this textile industries. Now, spinning jenny, which was actually invented by James Hargreave, but it was introduced in textile industry by John Kay in 1764. And the second was the steam engine. This steam engine was actually invented by James Watt, but it was introduced by the Richard Arkwright in 1786. Now, with the introduction of these machines in the textile industry, British produced clothes were started developing or producing in large quantity, in mass quantity, in immense quantity, and they were cheaply too. Then the Indian textile. Now, slowly the transformation started. In Indian textile still dominating the world. European traders, whether it's Dutch, British, or French, they make immense profit by selling these produce. Company purchase cotton and silk from India by importing silver. As we all know that the scenario was also changing. Before this bit, before Battle of Buxar, Britishers or the European traders, mainly Britishers, have to import their silver from Britain to India for buying the textile clothes or spices. But when the Britishers were able to conquer Bengal, they started collecting Diwani from there. Now they do not need to import silver from Britain, but they can invest the revenue money into this trade business. English East India Company gained political power in Bengal, and they collected revenue from the peasants and zamindars in India. Now, some important terms which are very important when we are learning this textile industry, we should know about these. There are some process involved in this making up of cloth. So production of cotton is the first process. Second, the cotton is converted into yarn or thread. And third, the yarn is converted, actually woven into the clothes by putting them at right angle, putting this yarn or thread at right angles. So these the work that were done by mostly women was the spinning. The spinning work was generally done by the women, and they use some charkha and takli kind of instrument. These were the instrument, household instruments which can be used for spinning of yarn. The second process that here is yarn is woven into cloth through weaving communities of weavers. So there were many weavers who used to do this work, like Tanti weavers of Bengal, Julhas or Momin weavers of North India, Sil Silk and Kaikolar and Devang of South India. So these were the communities of weavers. Like if we want to dye the threads before weaving of the cloth, so we can dye, and that special work was done by the Rangres dyers. These dyers were known as the Rangres. But if we have to make some designs after the production of the cloth, after the weaving of the cloth, then those works were done by the specialist block printers. Those specialist block printers were known as chipigars. Now the Indian textile started declining. So this all happening in a process, in a stepwise manner. So Indian textile had to compete with British textile. As we discussed, that industrialization came in Britain, and Britain started producing cloth on immense quantity along with cheap rates. Now Indian textile started facing problem in European and American market. Along with that, the exporting textile to England also became increasingly difficult or different, since very heavy duties were imposed. Because the when a cloth or any product is exported from one country to another country, then the country who is importing the product or the thing, they impose some amount of duties or taxes on it. So when the Indian clothes, Indian textile, when exported to Britain, then the government of Britain usually impose large duties on those textile to protect their own industries. Now, English made cotton textiles successfully ousted the, the, the clothes that were produced by the Britishers. They started flourishing in the African market, American market, and Europe market itself. Now, in 1830, the condition was that the British cotton cloth flooded Indian market also, and this was the time when everything changed. Now, what happened to the weavers and spinners who lost their livelihood? As we discussed, that the Indian textile started declining. So many weavers became agricultural laborers. They were not having any work to do. They don't have this weaving work to do. So what they will do? They turn towards the agricultural laborers, and some migrated to cities in search of work. Other went out of the country to work in plantations in Africa and South America. Along with that, some of the weavers started working in the new cotton mills that we will discuss in later slides, that how these mills came up, and how and some of the weavers and the workers started moving towards the cities like Bombay, Ahmedabad, and Sholapur, where these cotton mills were established. Now, cotton mills come up. The first cotton mill that was established in India was 1854, and it was established in Bombay. So there is a question that why the Parsis or the Gujaratis traders or the businessmen usually selected this Bombay as a place for establishing cotton mill. So the first reason है, it was close to the vast black soil tract of Western India where cotton was grown. So the whole area, the Maharashtra, that Bombay or Mumbai, now it is known as Mumbai, not Bombay. But it is important to know that the whole area was covered with black soil, and it is very much beneficial for the growing of cotton. The second reason is that Bombay had grown an important port for the export. As we all know that when the importance of Surat declined, the Britishers started developing Bombay as a port city, and they started their export work from Bombay. So Bombay was also important, as previously raw cotton was also exported from India to Britain from this Bombay port only. Now, how this meals came up in India and how they started flourishing into India. By 1900, it is very interesting to know that 84 meals started operating in Bombay. Generally, who own these meals and all, that is the Parsis and Gujaratis and businessmen. The first meal in Ahmedabad was started in 1861. A year later, a meal was established in Kanpur. So this is how we can see that how at the first point where there were nothing, uh, uh, Indian goods were flourishing all over the world. Slowly, the importance decreased and industrialization came. When these machines developed, then Britain started producing started production, as well as the rates were also cheap. Now, after we have seen that in 1830, these all British made cloth or produced cloth started flooding into Indian markets also. But it is interesting to know that some of the clothes were there which were still produced by the Indian weavers, like very fine quality of muslin, which were not be able to produced by the industries, by the machines. Those were still produced by the weavers of India, and the very bad quality of cotton cloth, which were generally purchased by the agricultural laborers or laborer that laborer section. So those clothes were still produced in India. Then it is important to know that the problem faced by Indian textile mills in India in the first few decades, it found difficult to compete with the cheap textile imported from Britain, and no duties were imposed of foreign goods. So because the India was the colony for the Britishers, so why they will put duties on the clothes which were imported from Britain? Okay, so this was the reason. And of course, by because the British made clothes were made up with the machines, they were cheap in rate, so they flooded Indian market. And the first major spurt, or you can say the boom in production, was done in First World War. So why it was done? Because the British textile mills started producing clothes for like army clothes. They started producing army clothes and all. So the requirement increased, and this Indian cotton clothes started producing clothes for British army as well as for the Indian people also, as the British made textile were not imported into India at that time.